Hello, everyone. We are live to discuss the bands of mourning, and we also read Secret History this month as well. So I guess both. Um, so
Oh, I thought that was next month.
is it? Well,
I
we can
did
talk
read
about it
it.
next month. I read it too, so we can talk about it next month. That's fine.
Whoa,
We could
I
take
didn't
a
read
vote
it.
in the
I thought it
Okay,
was
comments which
let's
way
talk
people
about
think.
it next month. That's fine. Maybe we were supposed to read it next month. We were just supposed to read it in between Bands of Mourning and The Lost Metal. I knew that.
Yeah, you got the orders right.
Man, I rushed through that this morning so I would be ready.
No.
That's okay. I'll go back and absorb a few parts that I'm like, what is happening? Because so if you haven't read Secret History, it's kind of crazy. So there's a lot
Yes.
that my brain is like, what?
I'm very excited to
So
reread
I
that.
can ask you. So Tiffany, it's a first-time reader. I can ask you your fan theories about what happened at the end of Bands of Mourning, and you can pretend you didn't read Secret History with all the answers.
Yeah. Well, actually, I had a note. I was saying before we went live, I took notes on my Kindle and I went to pull it up for the live show to review it, and they're all gone. Everything is gone. But I had a note that had a name with a bunch of question marks, and Secret History was like, oh, okay, I was right.
There were actually many clues. So the big reveal at the end of Bands of Mourning, there's actually been a lot of clues and even some pretty direct statements, even in I think in Shadows of Self as well. There's a bunch of them.
I noticed that.
I see. I missed that entirely. I didn't know where we were going yet. It wasn't until at a certain point in Bands of Mourning that I was like, huh. And then Secret History was like, you were right. Oh, goodness. So, Bands of Mourning, not Secret History. So what was everyone's thoughts? I don't know, is this, how many times have you read this one, Christy? Just once, or?
So I've read the beginning of this one because I remember everything that happens with Wax and his sister at the beginning while they're still trying to be terrorist people, basically.
Oh, the prologue. Yeah,
the prologue. I've definitely read that before, but I didn't remember anything about the ending. At the very least, I remember nothing about the ending. So I wonder if I didn't finish it when I first read it. I might have kind of DNF'd it. I don't remember DNFing it, but I literally don't remember it. So now I don't know. This might have been my first full read through.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. And Christy, and you haven't read The Lost Metal yet, right?
No, I haven't.
Okay. You've read Secret History, though.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
I don't think I read it in the right order. I think I just read it. I think I just read Arcanum Unbounded all the way through after I finished most of Brandon Sanderson's published works. I just read all of Arcanum Unbounded in one go. So I don't think I read it in the order that you're supposed to, but it didn't matter.
Arcanum Unbounded, I think, came out after Bands of Mourning.
It would have had to have, because there was a note at the end of Bands of Mourning and at the end of Secret History about how he wrote this as kind of this go-between. So it would have had to have, it was mentioned in both of those.
That makes sense, because I pre-ordered it and read it as soon as it came out, now that I'm thinking about it. So it probably was after I'd finished Mistborn and Stormlight that so maybe I have read it, but I did not remember anything. I remembered a lot of the other books, but I did not remember anything about this book except the very beginning. So wild.
Yeah, and this was my third read, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. I love getting Rich's seasoned thoughts because he understands the lore better than I do because he's had more time to ruminate on it with multiple read-throughs.
Yeah, but what's kind of funny is it kind of, it's interesting when I get out of the books each time, because there's a ton of lore and cosmurology or whatever you want to call it in this book. I think more than most, and that kind of stuff was kind of whatever. It's okay, made up physics. I was kind of more interested in some of the stuff that was the carryover, the baggage from Shadows of Self, and that was a little. we actually at the end of this book you got a ton of it, which was good. But like it was kind of left hanging for so much of this book. It was very, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was very narrative. It was a fun adventure, but it kind of left me a tiny bit disappointed because like Wax's whole arc around this stuff was kind of on hold for so long. But I have some thoughts though of what Wax's arc actually was and so on.
Yeah, I thought it's interesting because it was just like he just kept trying to shove it to the back burner as much as he could and seemed like not thinking about it or working through any of it. So we didn't really get any resolution with his like struggle with God essentially until the very end. It like really wasn't really addressed at all. And it felt like it was because Wax didn't want to address it. He didn't want to think about it.
Well, it was addressed head on, but it was kind of like almost like he was just kind of told the answer. He didn't come to the answer in a sense. I mean, it was kind of Socratic the way it was done. Like, well, answer me this. Would you want this? Would you want that? And it's like, well, no, I suppose not. Okay, no, okay. And I guess but it was kind of like this wasn't a natural discovery of his. This was like God basically hitting him over the head a couple of times.
I mean, actually, yeah, that's true. Sometimes it's like that.
I love your shirt, by the way, Tiffany.
Oh, thank you. Jesus took naps. Be like Jesus. Yeah. My church bought Peter and I matching shirts that say this like a couple years ago for Pastor's Appreciation, and I love them. They're great. They have a scripture reference and everything. It's very biblical to take a nap. Oh, anyway, so Christy, what was your thought thinking of like reading this, like not remembering very much of it? Like, were you like edge of your seat or?
Well, for most of the book, honestly, I was reading it physically. I was immersion reading it. But somewhere along the line, I read the last 2 books too by immersion reading almost entirely, like 90%. But somewhere around, I have like the exact last page that I read here. 300 page 320, I just switched to audio and I just listened to it. So I just wasn't reading it fast enough. So I think with this one, but the ending of this one was so crazy that I was kind of like, dang, I should have continued reading physically. So most of the book I was a little bit, I took a lot of notes, but I wasn't like super enthusiastic about most of it. But then the ending was so crazy. So I felt like the same with this book and the last book, where most of it I was like, it's okay, 3 stars. And then the ending is like, whoa, it's so good. So I guess that's just normal for Brandon Sanderson, the Sandra Lynch.
Well, I mean, some of his books are like that. I mean, he's got a lot that have really good pacing throughout, but
yeah.
And I feel like in this one, a lot of it was the magic system stuff, like identity. Well, and he says like in the forward, he really wanted to explore identity and investiture, as concepts. And, that's kind of funny because some of these concepts, it connects like the way he does connection and stuff like that. And of course, I'm a big Anthem fan. It's a lot of it's these Platonic concepts, which I like. But sometimes it's kind of like it gets a little, it's just, it's missing some of the character stuff. And, it's interesting. Some of the side characters I thought kind of had interesting journeys in this, even though they weren't like the highlight of the story. I don't know, we could talk about those, or I don't know if
that's true.
What order we want to tackle things in. Wayne has a bit of an arc. Emily?
Yes, he does.
Yeah. And Marcy too definitely had a big arc.
Yes.
Marcy as well. Wax he's kind of like a really delayed arc, and he's kind of like stuck in this, like it was like watching Stazid in Hero of Ages, it's just kind of like stuck on on repeat, or like he's like in looping mode or something. In a lot of ways, like his relationship with Teslin, his family, his whole thing with Harmony, and it's just like so many issues. I thought an interesting contrast was like the contrast between Wayne's relationship with Renette, which was stuck and got unstuck at the beginning of
Yeah.
this book.
Yes.
And Wax's, a lot of Wax's issues, but also Wax's relationship with Teslin and like his inability to sort of
Yeah.
see it for what it is,
Mhm.
kind of even towards the end. And it's just kind of interesting. Yeah, and maybe even to some extent his relationship with Steris, where it's sort of they had this sort of arranged marriage sort of dynamic, and that did evolve, and that I think was an interesting
Yeah.
arc, but it was also kind of like maybe a little bit on both of their parts, but it was kind of like a hesitance to just actually embrace that and let it evolve.
Yeah.
That's so true. There was a lot of movement of the characters, but not to the end, and they were stuck for a lot of the book. Or earlier books in
Or
case
Wax
of
especially.
Wayne.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think comparing him to Sazed is like dead on because that is kind of how I felt like I was feeling that too. And that's how I felt with Sazed in Hero of Ages. I'm like, I understand that you're grieving. There's a lot going on, but like, you're the voice of reason here. You got to move on.
Oh,
And Wax is kind of the voice of reason a lot of the times as well. So
I was
So there's
riveted by
even a
Caesar's
point.
arc.
There's a point like where Wayne like grabs him and is like, "Hang on, Wax, isn't it concerning you that I'm the one telling you to think this one out?"
yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I felt like there was some good character moments, but I was telling Rich before we went live that like so far this is my least favorite of Era 2 because I actually found it quite predictable. Like I predicted a lot of the stuff that ended up happening in the end and I never do that because I don't even really try. I'm not good at solving mysteries, so I don't try. But the whole thing with Wax's sister, I saw that coming miles and miles away. Like from the very moment they saw her, I was like, this is she's in charge here. She's got what's going on here. Like she's evil and I don't trust her. Why is everyone trusting her? So it still was but like I don't know, like a least favorite Brandon Sanderson is still higher than other
Yeah.
people's books. So I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. And it might not be it's probably not my least favorite Sanderson ever, but like it's my least favorite of Era 2 so far. But I really enjoyed some of the dynamics of the characters, and that made it a lot more fun for me when I kind of was able to see some of what was going on. And I did love the whole like the investiture thing and all of that. And like I'm glad he took the time to go into all of that because like at first my brain was like, wait, but how do you And so the fact that we kept revisiting it was very helpful for me personally. Because I was having a hard time wrapping my brain around how you could put your power in something else and then give it to someone else to use. I was like, what?
Well, and a lot of this kind of goes to his, and it's developed more in some ways in Stormlight, but like his concepts of like the spiritual realm and connection, and he gets it like how a hemorrhagic spike takes like part of your soul and sticks into somebody else.
Yeah.
And so he has these concepts where, who you are is in some sense a tangible thing that can be manipulated. Like not just like what you look like, but like your being.
Yeah, I think that I don't totally understand it either, but the repetition in this book well, it wasn't repetition because they were adding more information as they went, but spending a lot of time on it helps me to be like, okay, I think I sort of know what we mean here, but I still don't understand all of it. But
Well,
we got another book.
Emily, I agree with that too. Sometimes I don't think it's always consistent because he's made comments about how it works in Mistborn that I don't know where, whatever. And it could just be because I haven't read every book signing he's ever gone to, but I feel like Mistborn in some way, especially since it's an earlier book, I think there's a lot of concepts he's kind of had to, what do you call it, where you, you know, retroactively canonize,
Oh,
little changes to kind of make it fit with all the other Cosmere novels as his ideas, I think, have developed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And people asking for clarity because they're thinking it even more deeply than he might be at times. They're like investigating every little detail and seeing how it lines up. I'm like, man, you guys are like really on it. I just, I am not. He made a comment in an interview that he deliberately has a lot of rules so that he can then break them.
Interesting.
That's funny.
That
Such a rebel.
Because he'll set up the rules and then you won't expect it to be breaking because you're barely keeping up with the rules. But then, yeah, he breaks them. That's so true.
Yeah. He's created his own loopholes.
Yes.
I was gonna say he finds the loopholes, but I'm like, he came up with this. He didn't find the loopholes.
Yeah, something that was interesting in all of this stuff is how magic has kind of become fused with technology. Like if you look at like those medallions and everything, it's like, and the Allomancy powered engine for the flying machine and so on.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting how in this world the magic is kind of become ingrained in that way, and now it's becoming more accessible to people who otherwise can't use it.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I'm interested to see where he goes when he goes then to like the next era, because is that the one that's supposed to be like 80s kind of like, yeah, so that's going to be that much more technological. Yeah.
And then like after that it'll be actually supposed to be futuristic.
I didn't know there was another step before futuristic. I forgot. I think I had heard that, but I forgot.
He plans on having 4 eras.
Ah, that's right, because this era was a surprise. This wasn't originally part of the plan. That's right.
Yeah, and the Sunlit Man is set in the futuristic timeline.
Oh,
I haven't read that yet.
Read that. I keep having it come in on holds, and I'm like, wait, not yet. I need to finish some others. I'm in the middle of like 4
Sanderson novels are good. I mean, some are maybe a little better than others, but they're all good. They're also kind of refreshing because they're different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
standalones I think are good that way because you're less constrained with having to like just make it the next thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I'm here for all the experimentation. Nobody does it better.
Yes. It's always a good time. A fun ride. Never know where you're going.
I had a thought about how Wax seems to always get betrayed by all the women in his life, like Lessie, Teslin. It's like the exact same. It's almost the same setup kind of a thing. I mean, where they came from was different, obviously, but
right.
It's like he didn't actually learn his lesson after Lessie. The second time with Lessie.
Yeah. The second time. Yeah. Poor guy. He's really been through it. I hope he and Steris will be very happy together.
I know. I was just thinking that. I was like, hopefully Steris isn't the next one.
I love Steris more with every passing book. Like she is just, he tells her multiple times in this book, he's like, you're a gem. And I'm like, she really is. She really is a gem. Like,
yes.
Oh.
And then she and Mercy had like a moment together talking about it, where Mercy's actually happy for her. That was really sweet because in the first book, Mercy was like super jealous, So I was like, oh, I'm so happy. Everybody's happy now.
Well, like the one point where Mercy asks something about Wax, and then Steris describes her feelings for Wax like in this very poetic manner, and she's like, is this Steris?
Like, this is weird. Are you in love? I actually laughed at that part because I was like, it was just really funny how she was taken aback by that. I also, so something I didn't see coming in this book was Wayne in Milan. Like, no, I did not think that was coming. I thought maybe Wayne and Mercy at some point, maybe they were setting up for not Milan. Like I was like, this is wild. This is so weird.
It is very weird, but somehow it fits. See, that was another thing that I didn't remember that happened. I was like, really? But it kind of fits. I mean,
it does. It does.
If anybody was gonna do that, it would be Wax, you know.
There's a point towards the end where he says that like he's like, oh, I can't remember the last time a woman looked at me this way with fondness. He's like, not in a lusty way, with fondness. Aww. Yes.
Yes.
It's been spelled a couple different ways, because when she was a human, it was like Milan, like when they thought she was a human, and then they changed it. Then it was like MEEL. Is that two A's? I don't remember.
Yeah, and
I don't know. A lot of vowels.
Was in Hero of Ages, she also shows up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's been such a fun surprise for me. What a prominent role she has played in this series after being in Hero of Ages. It's like, oh, I don't know if we're going to see more 10 soon, but it was nice to have him in the last book at least.
Yeah. Something I do really appreciate about Sanderson is how his characters are really like so different, and they really feel like real people in the way they disagree with things. So like when Milan and Marcy are talking about how have things changed, you know, Marcy's like, so how have things changed over the centuries? And Milan's like, nah, it's pretty much all the same. And Marcy is like, I'd still like to interview a Kandra, but perhaps one who's a little more reflective than Milan. I really appreciate the differences there. You know, I appreciate Milan for who she is, but also we need people like Marcy, you know, thinking about these things.
I think Milan has a point, though. You know, like it's that whole like nothing new under the sun. As much as things change, things stay the same kind of thing. Like there are changes, but human nature is still the same.
Well, I was just thinking, not to open up a can of worms, but just like 4 years ago, we were all in the middle of COVID, and now you look around, it's like you never know what ever happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
So true. That's very true.
It's interesting.
I felt like the world would have been different on the other side of that, but it's not really that different.
No, it's
not.
Not.
Emily made the comment you really like that Gareth gets a lot of screen time development. I certainly agree, but
that comment.
I just want to comment. I don't think I've ever met anybody who doesn't put Steris in the protect at all costs tier in the in the tier rankings.
Oh my gosh. Yes. She might be protect at all cost in like all the Mistborn. Like she might be in my number one spot right now because I just love her. Which is funny because I was like, I liked her in book one, but she felt like a stereotype because we didn't really spend any time with her. And then I really
she was almost like comic relief in book one in a sense.
Yeah, because she just shows up at the beginning with the contract, and then Wax goes after her once she's been kidnapped and all that stuff, and then we see her very briefly at the end, and it just a lot more character development for others. So it's not, the last two books have been really wonderful for that, and I love her her self-awareness of like I don't really contribute that much, but I contribute some. 7 out of 100.
100.
Yes. And I'm like, I think it's higher than 7, but because she does I think that there are ways that they would be absolutely lost without her.
Yes.
Yes, she is so misunderstood by other people around her.
I'm still waiting for her and Wayne to but maybe they never will get on better. I'm still waiting for that resolution.
Well, Wax sets him straight at the end of the book where he starts teasing. He's like, enough. No, really. You're done. Like, we're not doing this. And I'm like, oh, well, if he realizes how much this bothers Wax, he might actually maybe try to be nicer to Steris in the next book.
I guess there is some resolution because at the beginning, he's still telling Marcy, keep going, keep trying. I stopped the wedding for you. And Mary's like, no, I don't want to marry Max anymore or Wax anymore. I've moved on. And that's where he has the revelation about Renette. So at the beginning, he's literally stopping their wedding. And by the end, Wax is telling him to knock it off. So maybe there will be change.
And Wayne is holding Marasi back because he knows that Wax is about to marry Steris. So like Marasi was gonna follow them, and he's like, no, stay over here, and like lets the two of them leave. So he was in on that. So was okay with it at least. That was really funny.
Let's see.
I have a few other interesting topics. I got a cornucopia of topics here. One I thought was interesting is the relationship between Elendel and all the surrounding cities and the conflict brewing, essentially. So the world's only been around for 1,000 years and has like all been designed, and there's like all the room in the world to expand, and yet there's already, we're already going to war. It seems like.
Yeah, that was really interesting because I just never even thought that there was anything outside of like that kind of like a whole other region with people that they knew nothing about or like even basically knew that they existed. I thought that was really interesting.
That's where I became interested too.
Yeah, well, when they first like encountered the people, and then they saw like the ship, which was actually like an airship and all that stuff, I was like, I thought that at first I was like, oh, is this going to be like an interplanetary thing?
Mm-hmm.
Not just they're actually on the same planet, just from a different like area that people don't really know about. So I was like, oh, is it a Cosmere connection? That's kind of what I thought it was going to be.
I wasn't even thinking about that dynamic. I mean, there's of course all of that's coming into play, but even just the immediate surroundings of Elendel and how much conflict there is in the basin area, by all those areas that all started out as part of, the survivors of the Cassandra and all that. How much conflict there is among them.
Yes.
Yeah.
We got through. Is this the fourth book or the third book? I can't remember. Third. There was enough conflict to get through 2 3/4 books without even knowing there was more people on the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. That wasn't something that was like on my radar at all.
And I feel like, was it in the first book where Harmony is like, I wonder if I made things too easy for you because you haven't set out to explore at all, and you have barely been outside of your little area. This is what was outside.
Yeah, that is really interesting because Harmony would have known.
Yeah, because he's already seeing other groups of people exploring the globe, but not the people near Elendel City. So
that's funny.
Yeah.
And then we have more of the Trell stuff popping up as well.
Yes.
That was mentioned in the last book, but now it's like more than just a mention.
Yes.
But it does throw me off because it makes me think of Skyward and the Krell. Yes. So every time I first read it, I'm like, wait a second, is this a Skyward? And I'm like, no, Tiffany, that's not what's happening. One letter makes a big difference.
And Tiffany, how many books have you read of that series?
Skyward, just 2.
Okay.
I've only read Skyward and Starsight. So
I just finished the 3rd novella last night, so I'm about to start book 3 for the first time. Super excited.
Oh, and Skyward.
Yeah, and Skyward.
Definitely share your thoughts somewhere because that's such a fun series.
I know. I'm really enjoying it. And the Lord Ruler popping back up, I did not expect. I thought he was dead. That was wild.
Well.
Gotta read the Secret History.
Oh, is that?
You'll get more.
It's actually revealed in this book. They thought the Lord Ruler popped up. But at the very end of Bands of Mourning, it becomes apparent it wasn't the Lord Ruler.
Oh.
They kept calling him the Sovereign, And it turns out it was Kelsier.
Oh. Well, I've made that
'Cause-
connection now, but I don't remember reading it, so I must have missed it when I was listening.
Well, because they have the vision, because the sovereign was described like a spike in one eye, and you know, and everybody just assumes it was the Lord Ruler, especially since he created the bands and everything else. But then it became apparent at one point. I forget it was Marcy or Wax or somebody ends up having a vision. Like, I don't know if those bracelets were copper mines or something, but somebody ends up having a vision through the eyes of the sovereign, and they look down and they see the scars on his arms or something like that, and it becomes very apparent that this was actually Kelsier.
I don't even remember this at all. This is wild.
It's in the epilogue, I think. I think it's in the epilogue. It's either
Yeah.
in the epilogue or the very last chapter. Yeah, Wax taps into a copper mine. I think it's Wax. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the really big twist at the end of this book. Is that
Yeah.
Kelsier
There was a lot of twists.
Kelsier is still around.
Yeah.
I did know that.
So
'cause
I guess
have read
it's
the
secret
rest.
history that makes you realize it's not the same the way that he's around.
Hi, Dia.
Yeah.
Hello.
Well, that's of course why secret history was written, is to kind of fill in some of the gaps, and
We
that's
just
why you don't
spoiled
read it until
Emily.
after this one.
No, because it's at the end of this book. That scene
Yes.
that Rich just described, that's at the end of Bands of Mourning.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't
So-
talking about that though. We were talking about secret history, but anyways, it's okay.
I read it this morning, Emily, because I thought we were talking about it today, and I got mixed up. So, but we're gonna talk about it next time. So, you got time to read it.
Yeah.
You don't need to rush through like I did.
Yeah, I'm avoiding secret history spoilers. There are actually hints of them though in Era 2. Like, I know some Shadows of Self, I think I saw one or two, and I think in this book there were one or two. There are hints that Kelsier didn't actually die.
Yeah, and I missed those.
I did notice
completely.
a couple of those.
Because he dies like,
They're-
I mean, he dies so early on. I mean, like not early, but it's like the end of a book, but it's like the beginning of Era 1, and so I just didn't even question it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's always interesting because they've always been calling him the Survivor this whole time. Like the Church of the Survivor.
A couple people have pointed that out now that you say that, how ironic it is. They call it the Church of the Survivor, and he's the one that they're like, shouldn't he be the one that survived? But you're right. Okay, that's one hint, isn't it? And I just realized it as you were talking.
Well, and of course, he was also the survivor of Half Sin even before he got killed.
Right. That's why I thought.
Yeah. Killed like by the Lord Ruler. And that's kind of like his thing. Like, it's like, I'm that thing you can never kill. Hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. But I do feel like with Emily saying this feels even more true in this era because of like people who have like the ability to self-heal. So there's so many people that you just don't ever trust that they're dead. I did a little bit more in Era 1, but apparently I shouldn't have with the Kelsier reveal. But other people, it was just like, oh, okay.
So Sanderson actually makes a comment on this, which you'll get to, and we'll talk about it next time if you somehow miss it. But I don't want to mention it now. But he actually commented on this specific, resurrection thing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And just that in general, he obviously doesn't like resurrection to be abused, but he has thoughts. So
yeah, because sometimes it just feels like for some authors, it's like we just want to tug on your emotions, and then we'll bring them back because we need them for the resolution of the story. But then there are times where I'm like, okay, so you just like wanted to make people cry for nothing. Like, that was the only way you could inject emotion into the story. There are times where it feels that way, and I don't feel that way about Sanderson, because there are plenty of
we
other
should
people
definitely have this conversation next stream, because there's a lot of neat things we could talk about with that.
Oh, for sure, and a lot of good lore stuff to talk about as well on that.
How about Wax dying in this one? That was pretty wild.
It was.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of resurrections,
Yeah, that
Yeah.
actually was a resurrection.
Yeah. That was
and
a full blown
and
one.
Harvey just gives them a choice. Like, well,
Yeah.
do you want to be dead or would you rather not?
And it's Harmony said he gave, like, I think, didn't he say he gave Vin and Ellen that choice too at the end of Air 1? But he was like, they're happy though. They're happy where they are. They don't want to come back.
I could say more next stream.
Yeah.
Because of Secret History?
Need Secret History.
But it might have been in this one too, because this one's fresh in your mind. He might
Well,
have
no,
mentioned
he did. Harmony said that to Wax before when he
Wax,
gave
yeah.
him the choice. Yes, we just get a little bit more perspective on that. But yeah,
So about that whole scene, the one that we didn't really talk about is the whole Harmony Wax dynamic, and I don't know how satisfied is everybody. I say I wish it could have been discovered a little bit more progressively, or maybe more in his own life and not just in a conversation with God after he dies, sort of a thing. Which was kind of a very brief or sort of abrupt resolution to it, but it was still I was still satisfied with it, and it raised a lot of thoughtful questions, but it also kind of came across of like, you can't handle the truth, so we're not gonna, we're not gonna share the truth with you. It's kind of what it boiled down to.
I thought it was really interesting. The element of the conversation of like, okay, yeah, so I could step in and stop this specific thing from happening, but then what about the people who are poor and blame me for being poor, or the people who are being maimed and blame me for that, or blame me for having this or that, and the whole conversation as well of like the how do you know I didn't keep you from the worst thing because you didn't experience it? How do you so to you this is the worst thing that's ever happened to you, but you didn't see all the things that I actually kept from you. And I thought that was really interesting.
It was interesting. My initial reaction to it was kind of like, well, this is kind of infantilizing. But at the same time, you think about, well, you have, you're talking about a relationship between a god and a mortal. Is it inappropriate that it perhaps is a little infantilizing?
Probably at times, yes. Not the same level of knowledge or any of that.
Because if you treated another adult that way, like this is how you treat your children to protect them from bad choices they might make. You kind of control their life, but you wouldn't consider it acceptable to try to treat another adult that way.
Yeah.
But in some ways, this is sort of it's like a hierarchical relationship.
Right. Yeah. I agree, Emily. I thought it was a really interesting conversation exploration of that topic.
And Wax could have chosen to talk to God sooner, but
yeah, he could have, and that is probably why he wasn't able to speak to him until he died.
Well, that's also true.
Yeah, so probably Harmony would have tried to maybe have some more gradual conversations with him. But I also kind of wonder if it ties into the, the mindset where people talk about like, well, we don't know why this happened, but we'll know someday. We'll know the answers to things. And it's almost like okay, so when you die, do you get a different perspective? So maybe that's why this conversation happened now after death, because would Wax have been able to look at it that way if he was still like living on Earth in the same?
Yeah, and I wouldn't have been satisfied anymore if he just had this conversation in bits and pieces. To me, unless it was just something, I kind of wanted to see him work this out in his life, in his relationships with others, and how he treats others, and so on, and maybe make a more natural discovery. To be told the answer is, whether it's in chapter 2 or chapter 172 or however many we're in this book, it's kind of the same, but I don't know, maybe.
And that would have been good too, because that's how we learn things on Earth. We don't usually hear directly from God. We usually learn,
not with an earring in your ear and he just like
Yeah.
shows up like, oh, you got me on speed dial.
That's a really good point.
I guess I do feel like there are times where I have learned something and I've felt like I've learned it gradually and come to the realization myself. And then there are times where I feel like I got hit in the head with something.
Yeah.
There are times where I'm like, oh, duh. God must be shaking his head at me right now. Like, yeah, I've been trying to tell you this for a really long time and you didn't listen. So I don't know if like that was supposed to be representative of that, but I definitely think that most learning is gradual, like you guys are saying. Like that's typically how it happens is in your interactions with others. But yeah.
Yeah. It's a little change topic, but Dia has a neat little comment there, like, Sarah saying fake being normal. And it's kind of interesting because I have a perspective on this. I feel like you can choose who you are. I think. I mean, obviously to an extent, but if you pretend to be somebody and that's just who you always pretend to be because that's who you want to be, to me that's who you are. So now on the other hand, fake being normal in the sense of just sort of to get along with people, that's I actually have mixed feelings because people, in the context of autism, that people have all sorts of feelings on that, but I actually I don't feel like anybody ought to be forced to do that. But at the same time, if you choose to be that, I still don't think that's necessarily making it. I still think that can be you. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there are certain like societal conventions and norms that don't come naturally to some people. And so then you kind of have to like mask until you are able to. Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe some people still don't understand why certain societal conventions are the way that they are because that's not how their mind operates. And there's actually a lot of good things in that because when we think differently from other people, that's when there's growth as a society because we're seeing things from different perspectives than just one.
Well, yeah, like when Steris pulls out her dossier on like her approach to party conversations, like, okay, here's the game plan for this party, you're gonna head up this person and make sure you talk to that person, and it's not how most people would think about this, but there are advantages to thinking about things so consciously as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, and where would they have been at the end of this book if it hadn't been for Steris and the way that she thought, then being able to negotiate peace at the end? They war would have broken out right there, probably, if Steris hadn't been there to be like the voice of reason with her intellect and all of that kind of stuff. Being a female in an older time period would have pressure to fake being more. That is probably very true. Yeah. I think you see that in like classic literature quite frequently as well. Like it feels like there's, interesting.
Yeah, like especially the relationship roles are a little bit more conventional, whereas because men spend more time out of the house, and you could be, like a man could just be out in the wilderness, hunting or whatever, and not have to relate to other people much at all, or what, I don't know. It's a different dynamic.
And I feel like also in the past, a lot of men were known for like their titles and their money, and so a lot of because that was what was prized more. So you could be eccentric, but if you were rich and had a title, it didn't matter as much. Whereas being eccentric as a woman, that then makes you less likely to be marriageable.
In that society, I agree. Although, part of me also always think when people talk about those things, it's like those people that had titles and money were like 0.1% of their culture.
That's true.
And it's sort of,
that's what the books are written about.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah,
you're right, because I just think of so many classic literature books that are like that. But you're right, Christy. Those are the people who are writing the books, and so that's more of a perspective that you get. So it seems like it was actually more normal than it was to be rich and have titles.
I realized that when we took a plantation tour in the South, they were talking about basically, yeah, this is like 0.01% of people who would have had a plantation. If you were living during this time, you would probably not have been that person. You probably would have been one of the slaves or, one of the people who was not benefiting from this in any way. And in fact, was being exploited.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, so it's like it all depends because there's just so many roles. There was definitely less social mobility back then. So whatever role you were born into, you kind of had. It didn't matter what you were good at. You had to make it work because you didn't really get a choice.
Right.
This is one of the first eras where regular people can write a book and become famous, and kind of that happens.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It doesn't really matter as much your background. If you can get visibility through social media, then you can market your book and become well known, even if you don't have as many resources.
Well, I'd be interested. I know not. I'm just gonna display my ignorance, but I wonder at what point did the literacy rate hit 50%?
Oh, I don't know.
Good question.
That's
Because I don't think it was that recent, but maybe it was 100 years ago, or well, that's 1920s, maybe even the late 1800s. But clearly it wasn't that far in the past that you hit a point that most people just couldn't read at all.
Yeah.
Or very little, like elementary level.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The only people who could read were people forced to learning to read the Bible. The people who really valued reading the Bible would learn to read.
Well, now we're really going off topic, but I remember listening to, it was a teaching company or whatever they call themselves now. It was an early Middle Ages history, and like scholars were all clergy back in the early Middle Ages. Even if you're just temporarily in school, you're still considered clergy, and then they were studying the Bible among other things.
Well, yeah, because they were probably also studying it in like Latin and Greek. And so they were learning multiple languages on top of actually reading it in whatever their given language was as well. So did you say 1960, Christy? When the literacy rate was 50%? 1960. So that's like more recent than, man. Oh, wow. And you've got even more. 40% in 1960, 72% in 1989. So that's a massive jump in like 20 years or 30 years.
That is insane.
It is.
So you're saying like in World War II, the average guy off the farm being sent into a battle couldn't read a manual on how to work his rifle or whatever. Like,
pretty wild.
I guess that's why they had all those. You can still find those old like documentary videos. Like, they weren't documentaries; they're instructional videos on how to operate a landmine or a artillery piece or whatever. You can, these from World War II.
This is a total tangent too, but I think in the literacy program, I work in adult literacy as like a volunteer, and a lot of them aren't people who were educated in America public school who can't read. Although I know that there are people like that too, like people in prison and stuff who never really learned to read really well. But a lot of them are actually people from other countries who are trying to learn English. And so, of course, they can't read in English. They may not read in their native language. They may just speak it. So I think it's changed. The people that need help with literacy, it has changed over the years. I think in America, it's more common now, for sure, to be fully literate.
Yeah. Well, and then I also think of like places like China or Japan where the meaning of literacy is a little different because the nature of their written languages, like they have the written language is not quite the same as the spoken language. So it's literacy has another whole concept to it.
Interesting.
So true.
We get the best discussions, even though this one, I guess, literacy in general didn't really tie in as much with Hands of Mourning, but we always get on really interesting conversations.
Yes. Sorry, everyone, for the tangent.
So actually, here, it's a little bit of a bridge topic, but another concept I found in here is elitism. in some sense. So you have the set that's like a criminal elite trying to change direction of the world. And you also we've had over the last couple of books, elitism in Ellendale and they're mostly elected, although their governance system is sort of a mix of popular and aristocratic sort of representation. And like Wax has like the seat on the council or whatever it was called because of his title essentially, and he represents the thousands of people who work for him, which is most people would not consider that sort of a your employer is your representative. Most people prefer their union representative or somebody to have that role, but it's just an interesting dynamic, and that elitist thinking of like, well, we know what's best for everybody. And now obviously the one is more criminal and does more overtly criminal things, like we're gonna go rob this train and shoot up a whole bunch of people as a diversion. You don't generally see the police of Ellendale doing that, but it's just interesting, that mindset.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have more to say than that. But.
Well, it kind of like it kind of, you see a trickle effect as well, that like now, like Harmony has remade the world since Era 1, but that was certainly prevalent in Era 1, and we still have people who are descendants of people from Era 1 in a world where the House Lords ruled everything. And so there's still some of that trickle down with like the aristocratic leanings in the government that was still certainly present in Era 1, and so it still is present in this world. So,
well, and you see some of it also, like the Lord Mistborn and the experiments with hemalurgy, and it turns out, well, actually, I don't want to say more than that, but sorry,
I love the laugh.
I like
the nervous laughter
there. This next bit I won't comment on, but it ties in, like that's a very aristocratic mentality, like well, I think it's important to understand hemalurgy. So, and I can only imagine what Spook was up to. Like, where did he get all these spikes from?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting.
Get along with Taravangian, maybe. I don't know.
There's the Cosmere crossover. Although, Hoyd was in this book also, so there's
Was he?
That's right.
Yeah, he was the beggar that gave Wax the coin.
Oh, right. I missed that.
That then had the copper mine with the memory of Kelsier at the end.
That's where it was.
Yeah.
Thank you for remembering it.
Hoyd gave
that's
that
where he
to
got
him.
it.
Mm-hmm.
I missed that.
And you just had to know that it was one, and then like intent is always a thing in this magic system.
Yeah, yeah. So Wax didn't realize that it actually was like a copper mine until the very end. And that's why Hoyd gave it to him.
Thank you for remembering that. It's the problem when I read the books too early. That's why actually, I held off on some. Well, I definitely didn't want to start The Lost Metal until we had this discussion. Otherwise, I'd get them totally mixed up.
Yeah. Well, it helps that I just finished it. So it was fresh in my mind. I read the Hoyd scene a couple of days ago. So it's pretty recent.
So do you want to speculate about where we're going from here?
Oh, my word. That's
actually either of you, because neither of you have read The Lost Metal.
No. All I know is that it has all I know about The Lost Metal is that it's got some really fun Stormlight Easter eggs in it. Someone has told me that one of my friends is rereading Mist along with us.
Eggs.
Well, she said that she's read all the Mistborn books before she read Stormlight, and then she and I read all the Stormlight books together. And now she's rereading Mistborn. She's like, I'm really excited to read The Lost Metal because apparently there are Easter eggs in it. And I didn't catch them the first time because I hadn't read Stormlight. So I didn't know what we were talking about. And so she's really excited to read it.
The reason I put scare quotes around Easter eggs is more like being hit in the head with a frying pan connections. It actually makes me wonder, I'd be interested in your friend's take on Stormlight Archive. I feel like if you read The Lost Metal before Stormlight Archive, you would have a very different perspective on certain subplots.
Oh.
So I feel like publication order is becoming increasingly important,
That makes
especially
sense.
between these series.
Mm.
Like it
Yeah.
really is to your benefit to read Rhythm of War before the Lost Metal. I mean, well, it's somewhat to your benefit to read that one before, but especially like Words of Radiance and stuff like that. Like you kind of want to start because like they're starting to become. It's less Easter eggs and more direct narrative connection.
That's interesting.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah, no, I don't think that it really tipped her off for a whole lot in the Stormlight Archive because I think there was a little bit of time in between as well finishing. And we read those 4 Stormlight books over the course of like a year or something like that.
Maybe if
So it
enough
wasn't
time
like it was
passed.
as fast, but she didn't know that that was something to even look for. She didn't know what was in the Stormlight Archive. So
you know what? Maybe I have a different perspective. Obviously, maybe if I had read this first, I just wouldn't have picked up on the thing. It'll hit you over the head. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about when you hit that part.
I'm like really excited. I
Yeah.
don't know how this is going
Also,
to tie together.
The Emperor's Soul is also a good one to read before the Lost
Oh,
Metal.
okay. Well, since I've read Secret History, I'll read The Emperor's Soul and The Lost Metal.
Oh,
It's
good idea.
it's really short.
Okay. I
Shorter
remember
than Secret
Dia
History.
saying that she loved Emperor's Soul, like that it was one of her favorite short.
Oh, it's a great book.
So awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see Emily's comment. Yeah, I mean, I think that you never go wrong publication order, but it's not been very important in the Cosmere. But like starting with like around Rhythm of War, it started at like some of the Warbreaker connections. Like it's less. It used to be Easter eggs, and now it's like just outright somebody's going to start pulling out a magic system and using it from a different book. Or somebody's going to mention a character from a different book, or like a crossover plot or whatever. It's starting to get that way.
It was okay. Is that your thoughts on Bands of Mourning in general? That it was just okay? Or is it Emperor's Soul? It was okay. Because I think I don't know if you were here when I said it, Emily, but Bands of Mourning is my least favorite in Era 2 so far, though I liked it. But
yeah, I would agree.
Emperor's Soul was
about
just
both
okay.
this and the Lost Metal. I don't want to. Oh, okay.
Emperor's Soul.
I don't want to say too much about Lost Metal to color anybody's opinion of it. I'm really interested because this will be my first reread of the Lost Metal, so I'll be interested. And I just did my first read of Rhythm of War, and I liked that much better the second time. So you get especially for me, you get different perspectives.
Yeah, no, that will.
But I would agree. To me, Shadows of Self is the best in Era 2. So in my opinion. Which means it only goes down from there, but it's that's not. But it doesn't make them bad books. They're just.
Well, fine.
It's like Words of Radiance. It's very hard to top.
Oh, you're told it was better than Elantris, and you liked Elantris so much that I could. Okay, I can see if it's really hyped. I can see where it could be disappointing.
I thought it was good. It was like kind of short. I guess I'm used to Brandon Sanderson being super long. So yeah, his short work I think is good, but his longer books are better, I think.
Well, any other thoughts before we wrap this up? No?
I was trying to think if I had any predictions, but I don't think I do.
I don't either. I haven't thought too deeply about it since I just finished it last night too. So I'll let you know on Discord, Rich, if I come up with anything good.
So what do you think the Lost Metal is?
Well, it might be I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It might be Adium or Atium, like because it's gone. It's been destroyed. So lost.
And there is actually, I think it was in Alley of Law, maybe, or maybe with Shadow Self, there was a little case where it had all the metal samples, and there was one that was empty, and it said Adium, the Lost Metal.
Okay.
Whoa.
But I don't know. I'm not saying that's the answer. I was just.
I think
it would be fun
we'll
to
see more of. I forget what his name is, but the one that kind of likes Marcy at the end of
Alec?
yeah, Alec. Yeah, I think we'll see more of him
Oh.
and
I
more
hope
development.
so. I really liked him. I thought he was cool.
Did Marcy say she said she was thinking of doing something kind of different with her life after experiencing the power? Did she say what it was? Again, I
I
was
don't
just listening.
know. I don't think so, but
So I feel like there will be some more development in what Marcy decides to do with the rest of her life. I
the
don't know
lost
exactly
metal
what.
will allow people to link between the different worlds. Oh, that's interesting. Hmm.
Interesting.
Well, it would be really fun to see how this all pans out, and I'm really excited to come back and chat with everyone about it. And then I'll be all caught up on Brandon Sanderson's series and ready for Wind and Truth in December.
And also Secret History. I mentioned to have that conversation.
Yes, that will be
That's such a
interesting
fun
as
one.
well. So read Secret History for next time.
I'm gonna launch into it. Like if I get the audiobook, I'm getting it. I'm gonna read it tonight.
Oh, well, thank you guys for being here.
Excellent.
And thank you for coming, everyone who came and everyone who watches this back later. Let us know your thoughts and your predictions for the next book if you haven't read The Lost Metal yet. And we will see you next time. We are actually meeting on a Sunday next time because we had a scheduling conflict on Saturday. So I think it's December 1st. It's the very first Sunday in December. So we will be meeting then. I have the date and the time in the description of this live. So thank you for coming, Emily. We'll see you again next time, guys. Bye.
Bye.